Kandahar, Lashkargah, over half of Afghanistan is now under Taliban control. The Taliban is now poised to take over Kabul, with the Afghan forces falling like skittles in their rapid movement forward. Fear and terror spreads across Afghanistan, as people cannot even flee. And this 3 weeks before the US forces will complete the withdrawal. It is a bitter defeat for the United States, with shades of Vietnam. The one difference is that the Viet Cong built the nation from scratch after the US withdrawal, and the Taliban, with its brutal and radical policies, will divide and rule. The American war in Afghanistan began on October 7, 2001. The initial 15 to 25,000 troops in Afghanistan surged to over 33,000 under Barack Obama. Almost 50,000 casualties. Over 2,312 US military deaths, $824.9 billion spent, death and destruction. And what has the US to show for it? Nothing.
Welcome to Off Limits. Our guest today is Vivek Kajju, who was ambassador to Afghanistan in some of the very difficult times. So we're very happy to have you with us, Mr. Kajju, and to speak to us about what's going on there. So currently, of course, we know that it's city after city, town after town that's falling to the Taliban, which is spreading completely. So, having followed this for such a long time and having been an ambassador and a foreign service diplomat, are you feeling a sort of a deja vu? You've seen this before, the Americans moving in and moving out, and before that the Taliban spreading in the similar manner and almost on the borders of Kabul. So what have they achieved in all these years of bloodshed?
Well, the Taliban in the 1990s did eventually come to occupy 90% of the territory of Afghanistan, and then would have, I imagine, occupied far more had it not been for 9/11. This time around, it seems to me that ever since Biden announced the withdrawal of US forces by September 11th, the Taliban, as far as their military operations are concerned, went about it very systematically. And I would imagine that there were very fine military minds working and assisting them. And it's not difficult to guess where they were from. So if you see, they first moved the northeast and the western parts of Afghanistan, which are outside their traditional strongholds in the south and the east, outside the Pashtun heartland. And during this movement, they went into rural areas. Many people felt that they were able to do this fairly rapidly. Then the second phase, which almost followed the first, they acquired important border crossings. Sher Khan Bandar with Tajikistan, then the border crossings with Turkmenistan, then Islam Kela, did not occupy or move against any provincial capital.
Okay.
That they will not be such easy goings when it came to the provincial capitals, to the cities, leave alone major centers like Herat and Kandahar and Mazar. So this time around, when they started about a week ago, their move has been very astonishing, and equally astonishing is the fact that there hasn't been any great resistance from the part of the Afghan security forces. So we are in the present situation that we are in. Mazar, I think, is holding out as of now. It would be difficult to really predict what will happen, because the militias which were there with Dostum, with Noor, Atanur and Mohaqqiq are no longer there. They can't be built up overnight. They can't be built up rapidly. But these are old commanders, and they have a faithful following among their ethnicities. And then, of course, there's Kabul. So the situation is pregnant with possibilities, and we just have to wait.
So do you think they'll go into Kabul, or do you think they're going to, as part of whatever strategy, that they're going to stay outside and then use that for negotiations further?
I think it's difficult to predict. If they are wise, I think they will adopt the latter, that they'll stay around Kabul and use that as a pressure tactic to have a government which they will dominate. Even if it's an interim government, it will fail.
For some level of international acceptability, maybe.
That also will come.
Yeah.
But I suspect also that there are groups within the Taliban who are pressing ahead with the momentum they've gained on the ground. And the dynamic of this momentum, Seema, often has its own logic.
Which is?
Which is that even if the top leadership says that don't go in, the local commanders are moving ahead and they just keep rolling. So we'll really have to see what transpires. And in such, it's been, I think history shows that in such situations, it's very difficult to precisely say what is going to transpire. There are possibilities, and what actually happens has to
tell me about the Taliban, the nature of the Taliban. I mean, we know that it's fanatical. They are, they don't follow any laws. They have their own, we know the profile of the Taliban. But over these 20 years, has the Taliban sort of really increased in terms of the local support amongst the local Pashtuns? And has it expanded given the 20 years of American rule and the brutality also from the soldiers? So obviously something that is indigenous, and this is the only group that really has that kind of a following. Do you think it's expanded, and that's why it's finding?
I think you are asking me very loaded questions. You're saying the brutality of the soldiers in such situations, Seema, brutality is all over.
Yeah.
I think it's
the Taliban is brutal. I mean, we know that.
But
the local population is what I'm talking about. The others who were not with the Taliban before.
Well, no one has mapped this precisely. That is the hard reality. I wrote a piece some time back where
that was an excellent article. Yeah.
Where I argued that that it was sad that the Pashtun leadership in Kabul, President Karzai, President Ghani, and people around, Pashtuns around them, really never took on the Taliban ideologically by going into the Pashtun heartland, by mixing among the people, and by combating the Taliban ideology.
Absolutely.
They were in the Arg, ensconced in the security of the Arg, and the Taliban had a free run, so to speak, ideologically. Now, we also know that during these last, over 4 decades of turmoil, the social fabric and the social codes in Afghanistan have not remained static. They've also changed, they've moved. No one knows precisely how they've changed, but some of the old norms continue. There are some new norms in place, and some of the old power wielders have given way institutionally to new power wielders institutionally. So it's a pretty blurred picture.
Right.
What can be said is that the Taliban, because of the support they've received from Pakistan, and they had a defensive positions in Pakistan, have been able to continue. And there's also this peculiar nature of war fighting in Afghanistan, which has to be taken into account when we assess the current situation.
So in the dawn, I mean, now that you're talking about Pakistan, it was an interesting story that Imran Khan has said that the Americans are really now looking at, and he said it, that he feels that the Americans are looking at India as a strategic partner, and that Pakistan, they want to sideline Pakistan. Do you think that's a possibility in terms of where the Taliban and the connections of Pakistan are concerned?
Well, it depends on the amount of, on the extent of interest that the Americans continue to have in Afghanistan. What concerns me is that if you look at India's western neighborhood, Pakistan is a client state of the Chinese. The Chinese are making a big play in Iran. The Chinese are fairly well entrenched, so their entrenchment is contested by other parts in Central Asia. The
Yes.
missing piece here is Afghanistan. Now, I've argued elsewhere that they won't make the same mistakes that the Americans and the Russians, the Soviets made. But I can't resist the thought that the Chinese will make a play for Afghanistan, because the lure of the resources of the Hindu Kush are very considerable. So we'll really have to watch, and this is again an important consideration for us, because we don't want, I would imagine, a block of countries in our western neighborhood which is intimately integrated or integrated with China, because that will not be satisfactory from the viewpoint of our interests.
So when you were dealing with Afghanistan, and even before that, India had a lot of assets in Afghanistan. We had the Northern Ireland Alliance with a proper leadership before he was assassinated. We had even the warlords who were creating, fissures within the Taliban's hold on Afghanistan. Now, of course, Northern Alliance is just a shadow of what it was. And the warlords, some have died, some have arrested, and the ones who are there seem to be not having the same kind of hold that they had before. Dostum has just gone back from Iran, etc., etc. So how do you feel? What does India sort of have the same say in Afghanistan? Can it actually do something there apart from infrastructure building? Or is it strategically pretty out of the picture?
Well, in the first place, I've never understood this term warlord.
Okay, yeah, all right.
I mean, this again is
a media
Western. It's a Western term. I think it was first used in the Chinese context, warlord. I frankly don't understand. We had leaders in Afghanistan which had grown through the Afghan jihad. They had a large measure of support in their ethnicities. They weren't democratic leaders according to the norms of standard democratic practices, but they were leaders with some support. So they were sidelined when the constitution was established and a whole structure was being put in place. And I've argued in a recent piece that it's ironic now that Ghani, after trying his best, and the Americans, after trying their best to finish these people off, are now trying to rouse them and say, you take on the Taliban.
Absolutely.
As far as India is concerned, of course, the current situation is totally different. So I've been arguing for many years, for at least more than 4 years, that given the way Afghanistan was evolving, it was appropriate for India to have connections with all Afghan parties, including the Taliban. And this was especially because everyone else was having truck with them. That doesn't mean endorsing what they stood for. Far from it. But I thought that is how the diplomatic game is played. But we've got astute people who manage our policies. I suppose they had information and which was different. They made different assessments. But the fact is that that if there are two sides now within a country, and a country like India has connections only with one side, open connections, and does not have the same with the other side, the margin for effective diplomacy then automatically reduces.
Right. So do you see anybody listening to this at the moment
Where?
in the Indian corridors of power? Because you've written it.
Well, I don't expect people to listen to me.
No.
I do believe that, as I told you, that we've got very good people in charge of our policies. They
Let's
have
see how it
access.
goes.
They
Yeah.
have access to information. They have access to other things which is not available to someone like me, who only relies on what is
So a last
in the
question
public
on
domain.
this. Yeah.
And they make their own assessments now. Uh, They could have been different policies pursued by them, but reasons best known to them, they chose to pursue the kind of policies they have.
Tell me, this is something we've been hearing for a long time, is that, if Afghanistan blows and these fundamentalist Taliban and take over with a code of very radical politics, it's going to have an impact on India's Kashmir. Do you actually were you a subscriber to this point of view? And do you
Well,
think that?
I would like to think that it is only through direct contact with, say, a group like the Taliban that India can convey to them its red line, can convey the appreciation to them that it has shown the remarkable resilience over decade after decade of meeting terrorist challenges in the union territories of J&K and Ladakh, and that it would be counterproductive for any group to try to join hands with a foreign power like Pakistan to assist them in misadventures,
Mm.
On misadventures on Indian territory.
Mm.
But that message can only be conveyed effectively if there are direct contacts and open contacts. And that is why I've been arguing that we should have open contacts with the Taliban.
Okay, the last question, and this is about, of course, somebody from our fraternity, Danish Siddiqui, who was killed. And now, there's this news that was first broken by the American papers that he was brutalized or he was arrested by the Taliban. You know that area, you study them very carefully. What do you make of this death? I mean, would you have?
I really can't say anything on. I've seen reports in the media.
Yeah.
But certainly, I feel very strongly that India needs to pursue justice for all its citizens, all its nationals who've been victims of terrorist attacks and who have suffered injustice. This applies as much to Danish Siddiqui as it applied to the young man who was returning from his honeymoon.
Yes.
And who was killed by terrorists aboard IC-814. So that is something which I've always felt very strongly, that we should never forget any injustice done to any of our nationals and never forgive. That is how a great power should behave.
Yeah, I was actually also pointing towards the fact that if it was true that he was arrested and then he was killed, is it something like the larger inference would be that were they targeting Indian citizens?
I really don't have. I won't know that. I mean, I don't know that. The Taliban. I was seeing an interview of a Taliban spokesperson
who denied it.
Channel yesterday. He denied it. There is evidence which shows that otherwise. So one really doesn't know. I for one don't know. And I've not seen any authoritative account from the government on this, so
we can't say really.
I can't.
So it's like literally, last word from you, that the Americans have withdrawn from Afghanistan almost in a similar manner when they, not similar, nothing is similar, but they withdrew from Vietnam. The difference is, I mean, to put it very generalistically and very simplistically, the difference is, of course, the Viet Cong were a different breed of people, good people. They made their nation, they built their nation, and they did whatever. And on this other side, they've left behind the Taliban, which is a brutal force, as we were discussing, and definitely doesn't follow any international or national norms of ethics and responsibilities. So it's very easy for the Americans to get out of it, and nobody's talking of it as an American defeat. Whereas
I've been saying for the last 2 years that the Americans were in strategic retreat, and I've said it in my writings that the Americans have suffered a strategic defeat. Now, why have I said that?
Why don't you say defeat?
No, I've said defeat.
Okay, defeat. Strategic
defeat. Earlier it was strategic retreat. Now I've said strategic defeat. Now why have I said? The Americans have argued that they've secured, and I think Biden has argued this recently, that they've secured the primary purpose for which they went into Afghanistan, which was to ensure that Afghan territory can never be used to launch a terrorist attack on American interests. Certainly nothing like 9/11, which was an attack which was really planned on Afghan soil. And they say that they've achieved that because they have the capacity now to monitor Afghanistan to ensure that that kind of a situation doesn't come to pass. Now, he says, Biden has also said that they didn't go in to do nation building, and that's not quite correct. Because the Americans did actually have a mission to do nation building in Afghanistan, and I don't think that nations can be imposed from outside. They developed organically from within. And it's a long process of nation building in all societies. It's not only Afghanistan. So I do think that after 20 years, if the Americans have, as they claim, achieved what they set out for, and they lost 2,400 men and women, and they spent $1 trillion in treasure, then why did they have to stay there for 20 years? This they could have done in 3 years and moved on. So the fact that they allowed the Taliban to regroup, to move in, shows that there was a lack of appreciation, ab initio, of what they were getting into. And strangely enough, in a piece that I wrote for the Hindu recently, I argued that the American predicament was the same as the Soviet predicament, because the Soviets could never went to where the source of the Mujahideen lay, which was in Pakistan, and therefore they were fighting a war with their hands tied behind their backs, because you can't win a war unless you clean up the source of trouble. Now, the Americans too, that was with the Soviets. The Americans too faced a similar predicament. They pressured the Pakistanis to get rid of what they used to call safe havens and sanctuaries, etc., and kicked the Taliban out. The Pakistanis didn't do that, and the Americans found it very difficult to go across the Durand line to really clean up these areas, because they didn't want to destabilize a country which has nuclear weapons. I mean, there can be, as I wrote, incalculable dimensions to this. Now, once you go in with wrong premises, you will come out with a strategic defeat. And that is why I argue that it's a strategic.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Pleasure.
So now it's very clear that this region is looking at trouble. is looking at trouble because the Taliban is on a roll. The Taliban has obviously gained in numbers, and it is moving ahead. In fact, as we are speaking, perhaps the town, another city has fallen, because in the last 24 to 48 hours, at least 4 important towns fell to the Taliban. Now the question is, and this is what the world community is hoping, that the Taliban will stop at the borders of Kabul and not enter, and use this kind of strategic control that they have over the rest of the country to ensure that a government of their choice comes into power, but where other forces are also accommodated. Or, of course, as Ambassador Kajju said, there is a fear that being on a roll, the cadres, their soldiers, the militia will take over and will insist that they enter Kabul and occupy that. Now, if they do, the politics will take a different turn, an entirely different turn. And if they don't, then there might be some give and some leeway and some international dialogue. As for India, India obviously has not opened, or not even maybe bothered to open, a dialogue with the Taliban, as most of the other Western capitals are trying, and the Americans definitely are, and the Russians, and now maybe the Chinese, because it is only through this direct dialogue that India could have persuaded and insisted and set out what is the Lakshman Rekha, that you can do this and no more. We have to talk about it. Do not bring any kind of violence into our region, and a sort of a give and take dialogue. Now that hasn't taken place. So we have to see how this proceeds. It's not going to be easy days ahead. It's not only for India, but also for the rest of the world and for Afghanistan itself. Thank you.